Okay. Hello after a long, much longer than I thought, interregnum, as they call it in British history. There's um Elizabeth and then James, right? This is Shakespeare's Elizabeth, and then James, and then Charles. I'm gonna get killed for this. Somebody who knows British history is gonna write in and say, ah. And then in 16, then there's a problem, and then Cromwell comes in, not the Cromwell of the Hilary Mantel books, Bring Out Your Dead and those books, and then if there's the glorious revolution, the restoration of the monarchy, which is 1688, as I recall, where William of Orange and Mary of Yellow. I can't remember. They're Dutch, as far as anyway, in the you can see why I didn't specialize in British history. Jeez. Anyway, in the middle of that, there's the interregnum, because there's no monarchy, but there is a dictatorship. Effectively, that's the argument. There's somehow, yeah. Anyway, so it's been an interregnum. What have I been doing? I have been doing crossword puzzles and playing hopscotch on the road and playing jacks. Does anybody play jacks anymore? Even when I was a kid, that was an old game. We're like, what was the, bounce and pick up a jack and bounce the ball twice and pick up two jacks. What? This required entirely too much effort. We used to play leaners with our hockey cards. You would throw a card and try to lean it up against a wall. You lean the card up against a wall and you try to knock it down. Another wonderful games of skill. Anyway, that's all nonsense. I think for the most part, the grading is over, I suspect. If you haven't had a grade from me, it's not your fault, probably. Do get in touch. Well, okay, wait. I was going to say do get in touch, but don't, because the grades, I haven't yet submitted them. And they have to go through this process where I submit them, and then they go to the associate dean, who is a wonderful person. She's just a marvel. We're just very lucky to have this person. She's so bright and funny and on to it. And she's a good human being, and she's the best. So that's Susan Kanabe. You may or may not have come in contact with her, but I think that really when you're an undergrad, you're like, well, dean? What does a dean do? But they are crucial to the temper of the school, and they're sort of very important. So, anyway, she's got to sign off, and then they go to Senate, and then they go to Trump, and he sends them back because they're not bigly enough. Anyway, whatever. Anyway, there's a long process. Yep. But we're coming out the other side, and it's been snowing, then it stopped snowing, then it started again, then the sun came out, just like life, right? It's snowing one minute, then the next minute, sun, and then you go outside and freeze your buns off because you thought you were going to get a sunny day. Okay. So what am I doing today? I am doing, okay, so there's more Porco Rosso. So this is, you can see here's Porco. This is a fan image, so doesn't actually look like Miyazaki's Porco Rosso. I mean, it's clearly him. How many other pigs do you see with dark glasses, smoking cigars, flying in a red plane? Well, probably maybe only 3 or 4. And there's another plane in the background. And so here he is in his little engine with an engine Chan, his little plane. And yeah, there's Mama Yudo probably chasing him in the background, which basically means Mama help, I guess. Basically, it's sort of like, help. I suppose it's help me, Mama. I guess it is. Mama in Italian is Mama is always Mama, and Aiuto is help me. It's the same. It's in French. It's aide-moi, m'aider. Who is calling on the phone? Oh no, I can't take that right now. We'll just have to wait out the phone calls. Okay. So rather than do toy time today, I thought I would start to maybe give you some suggestions. People sometimes email me. I've had a few emails and some notes from people saying, can you please suggest books and movies and things we might read and see and so on. And yeah, absolutely. I'm delighted, happy to do that. So in aid of that, that's why I'm wearing my Akira shirt today. So you may have seen this poster, which was on my door, which is always on my door, unless it's not on my door because it fell off my door because the stickum gave up. I don't know what happened there. That's industrial grade stickum I used, and it just one day it fell off, and one of my very nice grad students picked it up and said, "I've got your Akira poster." So I picked it up from him, and I've got to put it back up. Anyway, so this is the poster. This is sort of the famous poster for Akira, and it says Akira with I'll get this wrong, the kanji? I don't know. I have, there are people who know, and they'll be like, no, it's not kanji. Some of the characters, I don't know what those characters are. This is the same image this is what the poster looked like. And it's Kaneda walking to the bike, which is sort of the, I don't know, it's sort of the ideal for every Japanese boy, or young man, or older man, or every Japanese, the male persuasion, as my supervisor used to say. What persuasion is he or she? Is she of the female persuasion? Anyway, so this is the Blu-ray edition of Akira, but also has the DVD in it. This is one of the most gorgeous animated films you're ever going to see. So today what I'm doing is, some of you know about anime, many don't, and the problem with anime, the world of anime, is it looks like it's so massive and it's so big, and it's like, where do you start? It's like, okay, so I didn't think of this, but I have an anime sort of encyclopedia thing, which is very helpful. If you get interested in this, I'll dig it out. But anyway, that's for tomorrow. But so if you were going to watch some anime, where would you start? And what you need to understand is that there are sort of different genres. Well, there's a lot. It's a very complex world, which is why it's like people are like, oh, I don't know where to start. So I won't start at all. It's like, no, don't start. Start by all means. But the way it works is that basically, we in the West are used to animation that takes basically 3 different forms, one of which we almost never see, the public never really sees. The first form is the most common, which is the feature-length film. And ironically, that is the most unusual. In the West, it's the most normal, but in the rest of the world, it's the most expensive, it's the most unusual, it's the most difficult to make. It takes the longest, it requires enormous amounts of investment and so on. So in the West, anyway, we're used to, and this is because of the Disney classics, really. Then now I'm still speaking about the West. Then there's the animated show, which became a thing in the post-war world because cartoons that if you're thinking about, let's say, if you know the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show or hour, they used to have an hour of cartoons, and they were drawing from the Warner Brothers archive, basically, of cartoons. This was in the 50s, well, by the 60s and 70s, and this stuff is on repeat now. And you can usually find a Bugs Bunny cartoon, and it may go from anywhere from like the late 30s to the late 50s, you know. So it's a huge span of time. So those cartoons were actually initially, cartoons like that, not those, but cartoons like that were initially shown in theaters. So if you wanted to see, say, the latest Disney cartoon, there wasn't television. You went to the movie theater, and then they showed a Disney cartoon. And there were a whole bunch of things. There would have been a newsreel and a feature and a cartoon and then another cartoon and then some ads and another newsreel. And that's how people got the visual news. You mostly got the news from the paper and from the radio if you couldn't read, which was huge. You know, getting your news from the radio was huge because it meant you could hear the news, where if you didn't know how to read, which was very common, we just take these things for granted. We just take reading for granted. We just take it for granted that this is the way the world works. It's like, no, illiteracy was a big deal. Still is a big deal. Adult illiteracy, still a major thing. And people don't want to talk about it because they feel ashamed, and it's like, it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with, where they were born and what the stakes were when they grew up. And, it's not their fault any more than it's our. If you know how to read, it isn't because, you were chosen to read. It's because you were lucky to be born into a family that believed in literacy and into a country, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. It's a bit early in the morning for all this preacher-flying. Anyway, so there are these big cartoons. And then there are these little cartoons, which were usually about 7 minutes long. And they eventually began to move over to television. And in the post-war world, because people didn't have televisions in the pre-war or the wartime world, you couldn't have, there wasn't such a thing as television, really. Not until 1938, 39, the New York World's Fair, beautiful television set with just the cathode ray tube, with a beautiful modernist design. Oh man, you got to see this, just gorgeous. I think it is now in the Museum of Modern Art and Industrial Design Wing, which used to be the top. Anyway, another whole thing. Stay on point, Tim. Stay on message. So there's the feature film. Then there are films or animated shows that we're sort of used to seeing now, which sort of really began with the Flintstones, where you sort of take the idea of the radio show sitcom and you do a sitcom except you animate it. And so those were shows for adults, really. I mean, the Flintstones is it's not for kids. It's really about an adult environment. Barney and Fred and Barney are always getting beaten up at work by their boss, and and they have problems with their wives, and Wilma is sort of the boss at home, and Betty's this kind of sort of amiable, likable, sort of doofusy character, and but Wilma's the bright one. I mean, she's the one who runs the show. So it's a very interesting world. And then Hanna-Barbera gets in the door, and they make what we now accept to be most animation people have seen, whether it's I don't know, BoJack Horseman or the one Archer or the one with Stewie or all that stuff. It's like that all came from basically the 50s, and it tends to be the least fluid, it has the least motion in it. It has the most repeated motions, the most repeated backgrounds, because it takes money to make these things. Even still with digital animation, you would think that it would, the price would just drop, but no. And The Simpsons and so on. And of course, they can be extremely popular. But the artists are always getting nickeled and dimed, and nickel and dimed, and everybody gets. Very few people actually make money in animation, but anyway, that's very common. So you're probably used to that. So there's the animated film, then there's this show, and then there's another whole world of animated films made by animators for other animators, and these make the circuits, and they go on basically the tour. They go on tour to animation festivals around the world. So they can be anywhere between 30 seconds or a minute or to 10 minutes, 12 minutes long. And they are usually very unusual. I mean, they're creative, and they may be stop motion, and they may be painted, and they may be any number of things. I mean, they might be some animation and some live action. It's just the wealth of difference is incredible, and people do these films, and they send these films on. They go on the circuit basically, and the films collect awards, and they can be amazing. Well, we generally don't see that stuff. The National Film Board in Canada was the home for the longest time of one of the biggest, most famous animation studios in the world. The only, the next nearest similar studio for creativity and for just you got to see some of this stuff. You can see a lot of it on YouTube. There actually is an NFB channel on. There's one on the Roku if you have a Roku device. This is a streaming device, which is like Apple TV, basically. I'm not sure if there's an NFB channel on Apple TV. I don't think there is. But you should be able to see a lot of free animation, which is funny, amazing. Like, look for The Cat Came Back by Cordell Barker. You should be able to find that on YouTube. It's amazing. It's beautifully animated. It's just crazy, and it's just the song of the. And one of the ones we used to see a lot of, because you sort of see them for a while, and then you see them and see them and see them. You're like, okay, no more. It's like my sister and I were tortured nigh unto death by Paddle to the Sea. Oh God, it was made in the mid '60s. I think for the centennial. So it was made for 1967. And they showed it to us, oh my God, in church basements and in classrooms. And, my sister and I would come home. Oh, they showed us Paddle to the Sea again. And she'd be like, oh no. Oh God. I nearly bought it for her. They finally released it on DVD. And it's just, oh God, it's not a bad little film, but it's sort of this pseudo documentary about this, and it's just unites Canada. That's the idea, So this little wooden canoe with a lead base in it, crosses Canada. I don't know exactly how it gets across the prairies, but. Where there's a will, there's a way, as they used to say. Jeez. Oh God, I was so tempted to get it for her just to drive her nuts. I was going to send it to her house, and I knew she'd come charging down the road with like, "Did you send this to me?" Actually, she wouldn't. She's too nice to do that. Oh man, would just have been tortured. So Paddle to the Sea. Anyway, the NFB was equaled really only by the Czech animation world, and the Czech and Hungarian, actually both the animation worlds, which were behind the Iron Curtain. So this is in the Cold War, and so this was Cold War essentially Eastern Bloc. They were Soviet possessions. They were part of the countries of the Soviet Russia set up around itself. So if there was an invasion, basically, they wouldn't be the ones to fall. The first things would be like Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, then Yugoslavia. Would all go first. Poland would all go first before they got to the heart of the Soviet Union, Russia. Anyway, So in Zagreb, and there was this enormously strong animation unit, very, very strong. And actually, we just lost this week. We just lost Gene Deitch. He was 92. I can't remember, 90, maybe 91. Who was an American animator, famous American animator, who went to. I'm going to get this wrong now. I think he went to Czechoslovakia. He went to Prague. Yeah, he went to Prague. Yeah, and he was there for a small contract. He fell in love, an animation contract. He fell in love with the country and with the person, and he stayed the rest of his life. He was in his, I think he was in his late 30s when he went, and that was it. He stayed for the next 60 years, or 50 something years, and had a wonderful career. He wrote a book about it called From Prague with Love, I think, or something like that. Anyway, he just died this week, but he lived a really good life, and that's the way to do it. And there were these wonderful tributes to him in the animation literature, and so he was the one who animated Monroe, which I used. I referred to briefly in Killer Culture, but I don't really use it anymore. But I got in touch with Deitch when I started teaching the course. It must have been, I don't know, 20 plus years ago. And I was like, well, whatever happened to the guy who made Monroe? Because it's this little 7-minute film. It's a beautiful rendition of the Jules Feiffer moral fable about basically a 4-year-old boy who's drafted into the American military. And it's just wonderful. He goes. He's like, oh, this is his duty, so off he goes. and the Army. He keeps telling people, I'm only 4, and they're like, the Army does not draft people of 4, therefore you cannot be 4. Therefore, you are a malingerer. They send him on sick call. And so the film is a beautiful capture of the Pfeiffer's loose style, because Pfeiffer was this incredible cartoonist, still is an incredible cartoonist. I'll show you some of his stuff too. Anyway, Gene Deitch had animated this, and it won an Academy Award, and it was great. And I had seen it once, and I thought, where can I get this? So I started emailing around, and I got in touch with some animation people, and they were like, oh, Gene Deitch. Yeah, he's in Czechoslovakia. So I emailed Czechoslovakia, and I got a letter back from Gene Deitch saying, hey, how you doing? I'm like, how are you doing? This is amazing. He's Gene Deitch. Wow, you're the man, and this is great. So I said, will you sell me a copy of your film? And, I want to show it to my kids. And he said, yeah, of course I will. How's $20? I'm like, fantastic. So somebody duped me a copy of the film on a VHS here in North America. And so now, of course, I've got a copy of this thing on VHS. Perfect. I got to get it onto a digital stream somehow. But anyway, Monroe. So that's the third, and most of the really creative, super experimental stuff happens in these festivals, in these animation festivals. We have a big one in Ottawa. It's called ANNECY, ANNECY. I'm not sure if it's ANNECEY. I can't remember. And it's like a week-long festival of animation, and you just go, and it's like 12 hours of animation every day. It's amazing. And they bring people in, and all the animators are there, and they all know each other. They're having a great time. It's like, hey, it's Old Home Week. And you just see this incredible amount of different animation. Oh my God, it's so wealthy, so rich. So anyway, in the Japanese world, things are different. The feature film like this, which runs, I don't know, a couple hours, whatever. Yeah, 2 hours and 4 minutes, in case you were wondering. This is unusual because there aren't really a lot of these. So if you're a Westerner and you go looking for Eastern animated films, you will find some, but they're usually connected to series. And the kind of series I'm talking about is, let's see if I have some. Oh. Okay. You got to get your props ready. Okay. Well, here's a. Well, I'll leave it out. Okay. Here's an amazing series. It appears to be a gunslinger thing, but actually it's not like this at all. It's called Kino's Journey. This is what the spine looks like. Kino's Journey. And it's about a boy, or is it? And it's three discs. This is really a nice set. So it's these 3 thin pack, what are called thin pack discs. Each one of them, these days they would just make this as one, they would just fit this into one case. And each one is a disc with a different image on it, so you can see how much work went into this. I mean, this is a beautiful set. And Kino's Journey is an amazing, I love this. Not that there's a new one. That's not the one you want. The one you're looking for was made in, when was it made? I think it was made in the late 90s. That seems right to me. But there was one that was made, they made it again, 2005. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 2005. There was that they just remade this, and don't be near that. Don't get near that. What you're looking for is this one here. Now this is the way that things are really released. Well, not this particular way in terms of media, but the animation world in Japan is much more consists of shows which run for a season, usually 26 episodes. That's changing somewhat. They sometimes just run 13 episodes, so what I think of as half a season. And then if it's renewed, on it goes. And sometimes the anime, because the anime is basically, that's what animation is. It's called anime. And anime includes all kinds of things. It includes these 13 or 26 episode shows. And sometimes they will renew a show for, say, 4, 5, 6 seasons. I mean, they can go very long. Most of them are designed to end. With the exception of some shows that go on for literally, and you can have a show which is 70-something episodes long. It's like, wow. And some of them are really worth it. I mean, so you're like, yeah, I'm going to watch that. Like if you see Death Note, you're going to want to see all of Death Note. I mean, everything of Death Note that there is, you're going to want to see all of it. So you're going to get to episode, whatever it is, 36 and go, I need more Death Note. Because it's such an amazing story. So that's the most common. And sometimes when they're in the middle of an anime show, it will be so popular that they'll make a movie. But the movie is curious because it has to exist between this episode. So let's say by episode 18, it's so popular they decide we'll make a movie. So they can talk about the show up to what happens in episode 18, but then they're not supposed to talk about what's going to happen. So they can't show you characters dying, or they can't show you what's going to happen, and so on. So in the case of Akira didn't start as a show, it started as a manga. So manga, this is one of the phone books that's Akira. And this is actually Akira 5. So this is actually typically not the way manga appears, because manga appears in what are volumes that are called tankobon. They're just about this size. They're about that thick. And they're printed, of course, this is the cover, right, which for the West is the back cover. And so you have to open it from the back. Yeah, that's right. And there's some color usually, and then the first page is the second to last page, and so on. And then when you read it, so sometimes there's color at the beginning of the book, which there is here. There's usually depends on who's publishing it. So there can be some color at the beginning of the book. And then you're into this black and white, really gray and black and white. And the drawings are, well, it depends on, like, look at the, whoa, look at all the action happening here, all the explosions. It's amazing. So this is actually a really big digest, and you normally would see a chapter of, let's say at the time that they were publishing Akira, you would have seen a chapter of Akira, which would have been bound into one of these digests. And the digest, you would buy it every week, and it would be like a phone book. Well, okay, we don't have phone books anymore, so it'd be thick, a couple of inches thick, and you'd read that. And so the manga was so popular, but they said, okay, the manga of Akira was so popular that they said, okay, well, let's make a movie. So they made this movie. But the ending, Otomo, who directed this and who created it, hadn't figured out the ending yet. So the movie had to have an ending. So this is an amazing movie with this very strange ending, which sort of kind of drifts off into, quite literally, into the universe, and it becomes this very existential sort of discussion. So the first 20 minutes are very famous because it's just gorgeous and it's beautiful. And there's the jukebox is full of CDs, and consider that this was made in '84. There's my memory of it. Anyway, let's say it's '84. I think that's right. Might have been '86. I can't remember. Close enough for jazz. So, and it's an amazing film. It starts off with basically this gang of these sort of hoodlum high school students, and they're all about the drugs, and they're all about the motorcycles. And this is the drug on the back of his jacket. And they inadvertently wind up in the middle of a government project, basically. And things just go bluey. And so the first 20 minutes are this incredible action-packed, wow. I mean, it's so much smarter than Fast and Furious anything. And it's beautiful. The animation is gorgeous, and the images are astonishing, and the colors, and oh my God, it's just, and the picture of Tokyo, Neo Tokyo, because the film actually begins with what appears to be the nuclear explosion or the nuclear destruction of Tokyo, and the argument is that the first iteration of the film actually showed bombs with American flags on them falling on Tokyo, and then it's wiped out 33 years later. And Akira is this little boy who is so powerful that he's been separated into a series of glass jars, which are all his component parts, basically. And of course, he's going to get reassembled. It's just an astonishing story. And you think, oh, it's just about male violence. Like, no. The women are the K, particularly the female rebel, is the most sensible, and she's just got her feet on the ground. And the young men are completely out of their heads with one kind of idiocy or another. And there are these children who have aged prematurely, so they all look like they're 90, but they can't move around on their own, so they're in these powered chairs, and they can move themselves around the world. And meanwhile, there's this character who's on the front of this volume 5, who's this corrupt religious nutcase, and she you never really know. What an amazing show. So there's that. And so I think the easiest way to start, apart from Miyazaki, because you can just see all of Miyazaki, it's all great, it's all wonderful, great, terrific. But after that, what are you going to see? It's like, well, start with Akira. And then if you want a little less sort of macho action, because it's not that macho, it's not too bad. I mean, because the boys are shown to be idiots, basically. So it works pretty well, right? Um, then let me recommend Ghost in the Shell: Innocence. This is the second film in the Ghost in the Shell series. So the first one, the story is about Major Motoko Kusanagi. So Kusanagi Motoko, and she is a cyborg, and she has a cyborg brain, and she has her real brain, and she is in this sort of cyborg body, which is like weighs 1,000 pounds and has cloaking devices, and so it's all very fancy. But the second film, so that's the first film, and it's at the beginning she's sexualized in a sort of typical Japanese sort of otaku fan kind of way, and there's a lot of that, but you don't have to deal with that. So what? There's a lot of there's men making use of women's bodies in exploitative ways everywhere. I mean, we just have to. We gotta work on that, right? I mean, we gotta educate and we gotta. But whatever, But you don't have to live there. It doesn't mean everything. I mean, okay, let's not get into that. But you could say to people, well, Pornhub is the most visited website in North America. Well, in the world, something like that. But it's Canadian, right? So we'd say, oh, those Canadians are all about that Pornhub. It's like, yeah, 60% of Canada apparently is, or something like that. I can't remember what the numbers are. It's like, yeah, well, but there's a whole bunch of people who are not about that, right? So let's just calm down the rhetoric. The problem is that most people see hentai, which is anime or manga, which is sexual, basically, erotic, and that's what it is, right? So, but that doesn't. So, but it's got its own genre. It's like erotica. So this stuff isn't that. Anyway, so the second Ghost in the Shell movie focuses more on Batu, who is this amazing character. He's also a cyborg. And he has a cyborg brain. And he's this big sort of, again, another one of these 1,000-pound dudes. And he's very cool. And he has these inset mirror shades, basically, this inset eyes that are sort of pale white, and he's an astonishing character, and he loves his basset hound. And the director, who is this very unusual guy, his name is Oshi, loves his basset hound. He's had a number of basset hounds. So Batu always picks up his basset hound. And he's this big man. He's just very, and he picks up the dog, and the dog is like, and he always, like he puts the food down for the dog, and he lifts his ears out of the way because he's a basset hound with these big ears. So he always has a dog with him, and the dog shows up in most of Oshi's films, almost entirely every single Oshi film you can think of, because he also has made live action films, which are usually science fiction. There's a basset hound. And this film is one of the only films I've ever seen that actually quotes Milton, the Bible, Milton, John Donne. I mean, you name it. It's a mystery story, and its head is completely in the 17th century. It's about existential, the being and what it is to be, and what it is to understand our position in the world, and what it is to understand art, and it's an amazing show. So I saw this in New York, and it was gorgeous on the big screen. Oh my God! Even these Blu-rays, they just it just glows. The whole film, it just glows, and it's luminous, and wow. Anyway, so Ghost in the Shell. But it's slow, right? So if you're looking for action and like laugh a minute, it's like, this is not the film. Right? This is a very unusual. It's really a unique. There is no other film like it. It is unique. Okay, and then for a little bit more sort of liveliness is Paprika. Now, Satoshi Kon, who is the Kon Satoshi, who is the director of this, died unfortunately. Oh, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. It was a terrible loss. He really he really was just such an unusual, creative director. Anyway, this film, he often made films which were about film, and in this film, the woman Paprika, this main character, that's actually her dream name, goes into people's dreams, and she's a dream therapist, and so she goes into their dreams and she helps people figure out what's going on in their dreams. And so you never know, and this drives some people nuts, you never know when you're looking at you have to know the film, whether you're in somebody's dream or is this real, and then the floor sort of like just dissolves, and you're like, oh, we're in a dream. And it's just a hell of a run. It's a hell of a ride. And she's a great character. Kon almost always made films about women. I cannot recommend highly enough Tokyo Godfathers. Oh, I should have thought of that, because I was sort of looking at the shelves, and my animation is in a sort of tough place to get at. So I was kind of like, oh, what can I find here? But Tokyo Godfathers, I cannot recommend that highly enough. It's just a beautiful film. It's about 3 homeless people in Japan. And homeless in Japan is considered to be something of a sin and a crime. I mean, if you're homeless, it's because you did something wrong. Basically, you can't fit in. It's very harshly looked upon. I mean, there's not a lot of sympathy for it at all. And so these 3 people are homeless. One of them is a trans individual. Who is in a relationship with the man. I guess that's right, in the relationship. I think that's right. And then there's the young woman, the girl, essentially, who would be in her, say, like 16, 17. And there's very often the hero in anime is a young girl, woman, teen, between the ages of, say, it's sort of hard to tell, anywhere between 14 and 30. Everybody kind of looks like they're 15, 16. They just like oh, and you see them with children, and you're like, oh, I guess those are her sisters. Like, no, those are her children. You're like, oh, okay. So that's just sort of part of the tendency to make people look very young. And we have the same thing here. I mean, think about the films, most animated films are about children. Why? Because they're supposed to be for children. It's like, oh, stupid. It's just dumb. As if somehow children only understand worlds that are about children. Did you ever, when you're reading like those fairy tales, okay, maybe you did, but when I was a kid, fairy tales were about grown-ups. There were knights riding around. We know now they probably were 18, but they were adults, right? They were riding around. They're like, and then they left the father's house, and the fathers were middle-aged, probably 35. Because people didn't live very long. Anyway, so Paprika is hilarious. It's funny. It's surreal. It's beautifully made. Oh my God, it's gorgeous. So she runs into different dreams, and this one guy, basically sort of his dream starts to sort of absorb other people's dreams and other people's realities, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it's completely dream logic. I mean, it's there's these frogs that are these walking frogs, and they have this big parade, and it keeps absorbing things, and it's like the televisions that are talking and people with like 5 heads, and it's not grotesque at all. It's just astonishing. The visuals are like, the picture should be at the top of your head blowing off because it's so amazing and beautiful. And meanwhile, Paprika's in there, sorting it out. And then she comes out of the dream world, and she has to connect what's going on in the real world with what's going on in the dream world. And so it's basically not unlike Ghost in the Shell Innocence, the second movie. And now there are a lot of these. Okay, there are a series. I'm pointing you to Ghost in the Shell Innocence, Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence by Oshii, Oshii. That's the one you need to find. You could start with the first Ghost in the Shell. Just be prepared for some characteristically impossibly large breasts that are on this cyborg. It's like, what? Anyway. But then once you get through all that, the story is really very good. Also directed by Oshii. Um, so it's yeah, and there's this beautiful scene in the center of the film where things pause, and Kusanagi, the major, she works for cybercrime basically, is chasing this guy who's able to hide himself basically in the web because these are early basically cyberpunk films. They're not that early actually, because cyberpunk goes back to the early '80s, or the late '70s. But the Japanese really got it. You know, when they we've had a terrible time making cyberpunk films in the West. We just can't do it, except for The Matrix. But the Japanese have done it and done it and done it and done it. They just get it. They get it. Oh boy, they get it right. So anyway, I can see I'm going off in a bazillion different directions today. So bear with that. What are you going to do? You know, get a rebate? There's this beautiful scene in the middle of Ghost in the Shell 1, just Ghost in the Shell, where Kusanagi is on a barge going through Tokyo, which is partly flooded. So it's this future. And the music is gorgeous. It's just still, you know, very, and so there's this pulse, this one of these big drums that they use. And she's just on this barge, and it's a series of slow shots of the city, and she keeps seeing her double, and she's like, is that my double? Now, seeing the double is a serious, serious issue. In East Asia or in Asia, in in many Asian cultures, and by Asian I don't mean Central Asia, I do mean East Asia, seeing a double means you're going to die. Or something seriously bad is going to happen. This issue of doubles is actually really very important in all literatures. The double is important in Russian literature and German literature. We are somewhat fixated on the double, but not the way other literatures are, which is really intriguing. But when the double appears, there's going to be trouble. And we sort of have turned that into clones, but the clone, no, that's not it. The double is the other self. It's the self, but a different self, version of the self. And so it's it's an existential threat to you, who you are. So the double is a very dangerous thing to see. So she keeps thinking, you know, is that my double? And you have to stop the film and go and look. It's like, what did she just see? Amazing. This is very, very slow. And it's amazing that Oshii just stops the film and has this quiet moment. He does the same thing in Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence. And there's this astonishing parade scene. And it took them a year to render the scene. It's so heavy. It was computer graphics. And it's so heavy. And the scenery is just so astonishing. And the scale of the image is just so... It's just like there are these elephants that are, you know, 5, 10 stories tall. And, you know, this incredible sort of these. It's a parade. Right? It's a religious festival of some kind, and there are hundreds of thousands of people watching it. None of them social distancing either. What's that about? And it's amazing. But and again, he stops the film. There's this center. He gets to the center of the film, stops the film, and they have to find the guy, the person they're chasing, in the center of this parade. Basically, and the film just stops to look at it, and you just hold your breath for the whole scene because it's just, oh my god, it's amazing. So I cannot recommend that highly enough. But Paprika is a lot looser, and it has these incredible sort of, you know, this is just, so she runs in and out. But basically, both these films are mysteries, basically, and a lot of Japanese anime. A lot of anime is mystery. And the last one I'm going to recommend is this very unusual film. And this is for people who, by this time, are like, give me more, give me something unusual, you know, feed my brain. And this is called Tekon Kinkreet. And it's all, as you can see, it's all one word. And which basically means fist of concrete, as I understand it. Again, I'm prepared to hear from my Japanese speakers who will correct me. So do correct me if I'm wrong. This is a beautiful film about these two boys who you'll see here. This is dark and this is light, or black and white. And they're the cats. Between themselves are a gang, and they run Treasure Town. And they run everything. These two little kids run everything. And White, particularly, is a sort of... he seems to be like, is he there? Is he on the planet? Is he focused? And he is absolutely deadly. And there's a chase scene at the beginning of the film which will take your breath away. He and Black catch people trying to take their territory in Treasure Town. And look at the beautiful art on this. Like, they just took the images and they took the characters and they just put them on the disc. Oh, isn't that gorgeous? Oh, fantastic. And I'll show you tomorrow. I have a couple of art books that they used. They actually printed art books while they were making the film so that the animators could use them as reference. And you can still get these books. They're just beautiful. The moral of the story is that this film is basically a struggle, an existential struggle between the forces of Black and White, who really are at the center of the yin-yang, obviously. They together represent balance. And some other force, some external force, which comes to them and offers Black a deal. And the struggle is basically about that. So it's an internal struggle entirely. It's very much philosophical, existential. So the reason I'm suggesting these is that I was thinking about this the other day, where it's very, very hard, I find, to do comedy right. There are not a lot of comedies that I actually find funny. And we were watching some stand-up dude the other day, and the thing's like, oh, the best stand-up. I'm like, okay, let's give him, I don't know, 7 minutes. So we started watching 7 minutes of this thing, and I did not crack a smile in 7 minutes, and I was like, ugh. And I winced a couple of times because I was like, because so much comedy like that is bitter, or it comes out of anger, and it's like, you got a problem. I mean, you need to, you need to go away. And people are in love with Robin Williams. It's like, Robin Williams was able to do what he did because he had a head full of depression. He was manic, and when he was manic, everybody benefited, and when he was depressive, he killed himself. So it's like, and you can be sure there was more depression in his life than there was mania. Not that the mania is a particularly comfortable place to live. So for me, when I look at a film or a show or something like that, and it's like somebody says, "This is the funniest thing ever," I watch it and I think, so I'm sort of the whole time. It makes me tense because I think I want it to be funny, but I'm like, I'm not laughing, and I see I'm not laughing, and I think, I should be laughing. This isn't very funny. I'll try to work harder at laughing. So after a while, I turn it off, and it's desperate. I mean, I think a lot of Hollywood comedy, which is not sort of natural, organic, that doesn't, it's like funny lines that just naturally come along with a scene. I mean, I think there's smart writing. One of you was in a show of Heathers. I mean, Heathers, Clueless, just about anything with Melissa McCarthy. She's funny. I mean, she's very good at delivering those roles without taking any heat for being a woman of a bigger size who's not this sort of Gwyneth Paltrow. Okay, sorry, I'm always on Gwyneth Paltrow. I can't stand her. But comedy is stressful, and it's, for me, and it's a lot. So then I usually switch on, like, okay, I got to clear my head, because this is like having a bad meal. It's like, ugh, God, give me some ice water. I got to brush my tongue. Get out the, and now for dessert, a tube of toothpaste. Jeez. So anyway, so then I'm like, give me like just a procedural. So then I'll watch even a B quality, like B movie sort of, I don't know, something with one of the Hemsworth brothers, bashing somebody up or something like that, or just a standard sort of like just like a spy movie or something like that. I'm like, oh, what a relief, because I don't have to laugh. And I can follow the story. It can be stupid. I'm like, okay, fine, that's fine. But comedy is hard. It's maybe one of the hardest things that human beings probably do, because laughing is so unusual, and it really has to be organic. It has to be real, right? You don't want to fake that. I mean, it's awful, right? So the reason that you can have an action movie, and it can be not a great action movie, but it's okay, it's entertaining enough, because you don't have to have such great actors. But to do comedy, you have to have the best, right? You have to really have good acting. So I was thinking, okay, I wanted to start suggesting films and books that you might look at, and now that school is sort of settling down, I hope, and you're beginning to look around and say, okay, what can I watch? What can I see which is out of my wheelhouse or I'm not used to? It's like, well, you could try these things. And the reason I'm suggesting these, and they're not ha-ha funny, well, although Paprika might give you a laugh, is that they are compelling. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something which is going to focus you on this and say, wow, like that kept me possessed. Now, some of these things you're gonna like some of them more than others. It's like, okay, move on. Like if you think you start watching Akira and you're like, nah, whatever. It's like, well, wait, first of all, because Akira has a number of beats to it. The first beat is this full-on incredible action scene, and then it's going to slow way down, and then it's going to become this sort of existential thing, and then it's going to become a thing about religion and what it is to be spiritual, and then it's going to sort of end with our relationship with the universe, and it's like 2001 and Japanese, that kind of thing. So give it a chance. If you're looking at Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, and you think, oh, not enough action, Tim, it's like, see Ghost in the Shell 1. Great, just remember there's going to be boobs. Well, nipples, really. It's not so much going to be breasts as they're going to be these erect nipples. So it's like, then that'll pass, But Motoko Kusanagi is like the cyborg body they give her is like every sort of 15-year-old boy's wet dream. It's like, why? Well, that's why. I mean, there's no military reason you wouldn't make a cyborg body look like that. But anyway. But does it end with a discussion about, like, does it actually end with, like, there's a picture of the human race's development on the wall? Yeah, there really is. There really is a struggle between an artificial intelligence and a human, partly cyborg, human cyborg, partly artificial intelligence, who has a cyber brain, who has a real brain, and who is a ghost. This concept of ghost in the shell comes from Gilbert Ryle, who was British philosopher, also interested, he was also a mathematician, is my memory of it. And he proposed this ghost in the machine, that there was something in there which was alive, and there's something in us which is. So the ghost in the shell is like the shell is the body. So you can see where this series takes off into a different world. So if you start to watch something and you think, this isn't grabbing me at all, it's like, okay, so move off it, do see something else. But one of these things is going to hook you. And so I recommend that. And the reason I'm recommending it, and today I'm just starting this way, is just to give you a chance to start with one of these and have a look. And, if you want the procedural, if you like Ghost in the Shell, the idea, but you want the procedural, see Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, the first season, because then after they made this movie, then they made a series of it, which is very unusual. Usually it's the other way around. So made the movie, because Oshii is really something else. And then they made a series, so 26 episodes of The Laughing Man, which is all cybercrime. And the Standalone Complex is a really interesting idea. So there are these 26 episodes. And some of them are standalone episodes. So they're just about the thing. And they last 22 minutes, or 22, 24 minutes. So you're not in for a long haul. You just see an episode, ding, you're like, yeah, that was good. Let me see another one. That's how you wind up seeing 6 in a row. I can attest to this. And there's lots of great anime. Which is thoughtful and, it's interesting and, there's a beautiful anime which I'll show you some images of tomorrow, called Mushishi, right? That's what I'm trying to think of. Which was also a manga first. Anyway, there's lots to come, but the idea here is that I wanted you to have a place to start looking, and then if you're interested in this, I mean, there are people who are in. Particularly, there's one person in. There are a couple of you in Killer Culture who are very knowledgeable about anime, and also actually in the other course as well, in Rebel Knowledge. And so, by all means, if you, we've talked about a number of different shows. One of you really likes My Hero Academia, which is a new show. And a lot of these you can get on Netflix now, so you can test them out quite easily. What I'll do, I guess, is have a look at Netflix and see what they have that I can recommend. I was watching Violet Evergarden. The thing is, at a certain point, you've seen you've seen a lot of anime probably, and you're like, you get fussy. You're like, that's not good enough. Come on, I'm going to see whatever. But there are some real winners out there that are just, they'll keep you strapped to your seat. Death Note is certainly one. Mushishi is one. If you're looking for something which is peaceful and meditative, Mushishi is your thing, which I'll talk about, some more. So basically, I will talk about other things, but I wanted to check in with you today and offer you things which would be captivating in the best sense of the word and compelling, as opposed to things where you're looking for something which is going to make you laugh. It's like making you laugh it's good, it's great if you can have it, but it's also difficult. And I think we don't necessarily appreciate just how hard comedy is, as opposed to straight narrative storytelling, which can be, although it's still very, very difficult, can be a lot easier, can be a lot more successful, which I think is why when you look at comedy, you're like, yeah, I'm not, that doesn't light my fire. This really what drove my feeling about the situation where we're at now, say, as opposed to, I don't know, a month ago, let's say, because it's been nearly a month, I guess, that we've been in, is that I think that things have probably steadied out, and that's a good thing, of course. But it also means that we need to find things in the environment which are surprising and unusual. Now, I'm always looking for that. I don't, doesn't matter to me really kind of what's going on outside. That's what art is. For me, it takes me by surprise. Great art will take you by surprise and take your breath away, and you'll be like, it's many great art exhibits that I've been in, and where people will say, oh, that's just junk. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care whether people say it's junk or not. What matters to me is that I stood there going, oh, like somebody came along and conked me on the head. I'm like, oh, wow. So that's what I'm looking for. So the reason that I am at the moment not... Yeah, okay. So, philosophically, more tomorrow. Until then, drink some good tea. Okay.